I grew up with this very deep sense of who I was as an Ethiopian and of that culture, and but also being biracial, someone who was also very much raised in the States with an American mother. It was really like I grew up with this kind of constantly negotiating and renegotiating my identity and who I was. And I always, since I was very young, made art. The conversation first came up when I was with Christine in LA, and she took me around to see the James Turrell exhibition, which she had curated.
Okay, and then come towards me.
And I thought that that was a really great show. So we were talking about that, and then she started asking me questions of, have you ever thought about that type of a project, and how would you think around that kind of thing? So that's when I first remember the conversation starting between us. I had worked with Christine for such a long time, and I was really excited by the idea, and so that's how it began.
Mm-hmm. This is also nice how Bardou is bringing in some color into here.
Yes, right? Mm-hmm. It changes that room. Mm-hmm. She proposed the show to several different venues with this idea. Ru at the Whitney really took the project on.
Also thinking about a mid-career survey, we start at a certain place where you started and we end where we are now, but of course the whole point is to see the connection and the connective tissue between this 90s moment and 2019 and then beyond.
So they've been both very engaged in crafting the show, what we're including, and how we're kind of distilling 23 years of work into this moment. But it puts this,
Can you put just
this
up
erasure
here,
in
this
context.
one and that one on the screen?
In working with Julie for so long, I feel that her process hasn't changed much, but the outcome and the result of the process has changed immensely. It usually starts with the research process and collecting all the archive materials we do, and then to actually executing the work and the back and forth that happens then between the studio and Julie.
Well, the first step usually will be an airbrush painting. Then you never know. Julie could decide to paint into it immediately. She could decide that she would like to silkscreen into it first. She could decide to introduce airbrushing of her own. So in terms of the way she responds to each piece, it is always changing with every work. So this could be a minimal piece where it could be the underpainting and just Julie's hand, or this could be a piece that has multiple layers of silkscreen and multiple layers of masking and painting and erasure and more silkscreen. So, I mean, it's her own language, it's her own visual vocabulary, it's her own way of working.
She's really concentrated on abstraction of late. Coming from 2016 to now, she's putting a little bit more of that blurred image of the race riot or protests into the background of the painting, blurring it. You can't tell what it is, of course, but it's there, and then layering all the colors and all of her marks and all of the screen printing on top of that.
All right. Great.
And I've been working with news media images since the mid-90s when I was in school and had been collecting these media images. And they've always been something that feeds my work, and they're always the context of which I'm working in. And I used them very differently earlier when I was tracing parts of the infrastructure of these places. I would have these images and I'd get them printed onto transparent sheets of plastic. And then on those transparencies, I'd project to the painting and we'd trace certain things that I wanted in the painting. And so they become almost this collage of all these different tracings from all these various photographs. Then I started there were these blurs that would happen as you project that onto the canvas, and I became much more interested, not in the tracing or in the space that was that, but actually in the blurred image that could exist on there. So I started to then work in Photoshop because you could then do that to any image, you could blur it. When I was working on Haka, I started to look at the detention centers on the southern border. And these are two images, and I used several of these, not just these two, but these, the painting, the Haka painting has several of those blurs layered into one another. But these are several that I used. If it's this area of the beds, this blur of that image becomes something else occurs in this, and it becomes more about the color, the space, the infrastructure, the time of the day, what all of that is a part of this blur and a part of what becomes something in this image. And this information becomes part of the haunting, or part of the what kind of, in a way, activates what I can do in the painting and what then continues to evolve in the painting. And that's what I'm most interested in.
That's the tiniest bit.
I mean, it's hard to explain because this becomes then manipulated further and layered with other blurs.
Layering in Julie's painting has evolved so much over the years, but has kept drawing at its foundation over all of these years. Even as we look at the newer works that are looser, more gestural, have these sort of expanses of color and screen printing and spraying, but drawing as this sort of most elemental kind of human gesture is something that Julie very much adheres to.
When I was at RISD, I had done those big drawings where it was one gesture on each piece of paper. But somehow when I would make one mark, and then I made that mark over and over and over and over, it repeated in a pattern in a particular way. Those early drawings started to set up a way that I started to think about mark making, that opened up a way of thinking and of making that I still feel like I rely on so much today, which is to work in a space of unknowing, and it's difficult, but to trust in the process of actually inventing and making.
I like this one a lot.
Yeah, that's, I think, is
I
important.
really like that
Yeah,
one.
so let's keep that. I feel like they're really different when you hold them up just to see them, because then you get to actually engage with them differently, but I think the question of abstraction is complicated because abstraction as a concept is complicated. And I don't know, there's moments in my work that feel more abstract than others. And there are moments where the paintings feel very landscape oriented, or they feel like images of places or a place. And then there are other moments where they're really about the mark making and about the surface and what's happening within the gestural language. There's a certain experiential dynamic you can have within an abstract painting, but also there isn't a particular reading. And I was really interested in that space, this space of flux and fluidity and opacity, and I think there's a lot of freedom in that space. For me, that was really important.